Hey there, everyone. That Sexy Nerd is back again, and we're watching more History Buffs. I know I'm really late on this one, but yeah, they did Robin Hood, and that means we're talking about King John and Richard II. I approve. So, yeah, even though there's actually a really good video that I saw recently about King John, about the worst English king, and it was actually pretty damn good. I honestly should react to it because I haven't even finished watching it. But yeah, we got Robin Hood to go on. Now, I never saw this movie. I heard that it was like they took this subject way too seriously or some crap. That they made the story too serious. It's supposed to be a little silly and whatnot, like the other live action one, like the one with Severus Snape as the Sheriff of Nottingham. I just don't know who was Robin Hood in that movie because I don't remember. I don't think I ever watched that one, actually. Now that I think about it, and I love Alan Rickman, but because I even see Die Hard and dun dun da 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 da. But oh my god, I wish people would just come in and go dun dun da 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 da. Oh, if only. Maybe I should do some of those Harry Potter movies. My nephew is actually watching a lot of movies that he's never seen before, so might just do something like that. I don't think he's seen the Harry Potter movies or seen too many of them, so not bad subject to do it on, I guess. But anyway, yeah, this is going to be interesting because, again, I thought that this movie was like way too serious when I saw it. It was by Ridley Scott, right? It's the one by Ridley Scott. And I never saw it because I thought it was a joke. And it seemed like, again, with Ridley Scott, he's fucking obsessed with Gladiator. So they're trying to, they even cast Russell Crowe as Robin Hood. That makes no sense. But let's see what the damage is. Not much to say, but at least the video will be informative. And remember, please, smash that like button if you want to see more sexy and nerdy content, and subscribe if you think I deserve it. And let's do this thing, y'all.
Hello and welcome, History Buffs. My name is Nick Hodges, and today we'll be exploring one of the most famous legends in English history, the story of Robin Hood. There's been dozens of iterations of Robin Hood over the years, from films to TV shows. Perhaps the most classic is Errol Flynn, where a blonde man in green tights swings from trees, shoots impossibly precise arrows, and courts their maid Marian. Or perhaps you grew up with the Disney version, watching Robin Hood the Fox outwit King John and the Sheriff of Nottingham. Regardless of how you got to know him, the Robin Hood legend has been around for generations. And in 2010, we got another version of the classic character, this time played by Russell Crowe and directed by Ridley Scott. 10 years prior, the two worked together to create the cinematic masterpiece Gladiator. Sure, it was historically inaccurate, but as I said in my review 7 years ago, I still loved that film, despite its issues. Hans Zimmer's score was moving, the writing spot on, and the characters felt real. So with the rich history surrounding Robin Hood in medieval England, I'm sure Russell Crowe and Ridley Scott made another masterpiece, right? Well, the film is set in 1199, in the midst of a political crisis. Richard the Lionheart, one of the most beloved Plantagenet kings, dies in battle. His brother John takes over as King of England. But whilst Richard was loved and respected by his people, John, not so much. Nope. He was seen as weak, impetuous, and soon political minds schemed to remove him from power. Out of this political uncertainty, we meet Robin Longstride, our titular hero, who helps change the course of English history. But does this Robin Hood fit in with the Robin Hood of legend?
No.
Is the film accurate to the real history of King John's England? Although Robin Hood is fictional, the story in the film is based on real people and events from medieval England, and in this review we'll take a look at the legend of Robin Hood and how the character has changed over time. Then we'll analyze the film to see how historically accurate it is, and whether or not it's a convincing iteration of the classic story. This is Robin Hood.
Alright, let's do this. I'm excited.
Before I get started on the movie and discussing how accurate it is, I'm going to spend this chapter just talking about the origin of the legend itself. Now, Robin Hood has been a part of English folklore for hundreds of years. The oldest surviving literary reference dates back to the 14th century. He first appeared in William Langland's The Vision of Piers Plowman, a poem that many agree came out in 1377. In it, a peasant mentions that he doesn't know the Lord's Prayer, but can recite the stories of Robin Hood. It's an offhand reference that doesn't feature as a main element of the story, but it tells us that Robin Hood was a well-known figure in the medieval world. It's likely then that Robin Hood's stories were circulating well before they appeared in text. Some historians think that he dates back to the early to the mid 13th century. The earliest surviving ballads that feature Robin Hood are from around 1450. In them, Robin Hood encounters various characters that are now staples of the legend, including Little John and the Sheriff of Nottingham. Though many of us know Robin Hood to be a mischievous, swashbuckling trickster making fools of greedy noblemen, the original Robin Hood was less jolly.
I demand to know who you are!
We are men of the hood.
Oh, all right.
Marry now at your expense.
He was an outlaw and behaved like one. He lived in the greenwood of central England, usually depicted as Sherwood Forest in Nottingham. Robin Hood often wore disguises to avoid capture and did his best to outwit his enemies.
Okay.
In several of these early ballads, both Robin Hood and his merry men committed murder to get what they wanted. A far cry from the noble thief of today's stories.
Really?
The goal was to take money off the rich, men he deemed greedy and immoral, and live off the grid in the forest. This is not the Robin Hood that stole from the rich to give to the poor. This was an English outlaw, one who represented the plight of the commoner against the might of the nobility. The original Robin Hood was a yeoman, a commoner with a small plot of land in feudal England. His initial stories commonly take place in the early 13th century, during the reign of King John. During this time, trade with the empires in the east brought money and goods to Europe. This in turn improved the standard of living, which also meant a growing population. A growing population meant more food, so peasants were burdened with more work. It was out of this feudal tension that Robin Hood was born, a yeoman, looked down upon as a dirty peasant by the social elite, because he was one of them.
What I object to is they automatically treat me like an inferior. Well, I am king. Oh, king, eh? Very nice. And how do you get that, eh? By exploiting the workers. By hanging on to outdated imperialist dogma which perpetuates the economic and social differences in our society.
And shit has not changed.
If there's ever going to be any progress...
There's some lovely filth down here!
By stealing from nobles and dealing with corruption in the church, Robin Hood represented an escape from the social order. These stories also reflected a time in England when tensions between social classes were growing. First, there was a period known as the Anarchy, a civil war in England in the mid-12th century where law and order broke down and peasants had little protection from the chaos. Then in the 14th century, two major events burdened the peasants further: the beginning of the 100 Years' War, which saw the destruction of peasant farms, and the spread of the Black Death, which killed millions. It's no wonder then that the mythical Robin Hood emerged to help the peasants and fight back against the strict feudal order. But as time went on, Robin Hood's character changed. In the 16th century, Robin Hood was no longer a yeoman peasant representing just the downtrodden, but a nobleman dispossessed. In books, he was Robert, Earl of Huntingdon, whose land was taken away by King John. This era of Robin Hood stories also incorporated the reign of King Richard the Lionheart. Stories focused on how John took power away from his brother Richard while he was away on crusade, and also how he stole land from nobles like Robin Hood. In turn, Robin Hood pledged loyalty to his true king, King Richard, and fought against John and his minions in a variety of adventures. This is a remarkable change from the earlier versions of the character. Now, he was an ally of some noblemen, just not the obviously bad ones. This shift coincided with the Tudor period in English history. Prior to the Tudors, Robin Hood was a hero to the peasantry. The Tudors, however, were fascinated by English folklore. Under them, Robin Hood changed to represent different virtues: hospitality, generosity, Christianity, and loyalty to the crown. This is the Robin Hood that steals from the bad guys and gives to the poor, but is also fiercely loyal to King Richard, a version loved by both peasants and noblemen. In the 17th century, the Robin Hood universe grew to include other beloved characters like Friar Tuck and Maid Marian. Maid Marian existed as a separate character associated with Mayday, but was later incorporated into the Robin Hood stories.
Really?
Surprisingly, this works. Mayday is associated with raucous, jolly celebration and the upending of social order, just like Robin Hood. If you've ever seen Morris dances, then you get it. And if you haven't been blessed by this absolute marvel of traditional English folklore,
I like
well,
to see that.
Now you know. This
They're
new Tudor
weird.
age Robin Hood was jolly and raucous as well, so he fit in nicely with May Day
Tice.
celebrations.
Look
May
at
Day,
Dave
like
Chappelle.
Robin Hood, is also associated with green, so the two merged together. Maid Marian was incorporated into the Robin Hood stories as his love interest and has remained part of the legends ever since. The modern version of Robin Hood that we best recognise comes from the 1820 book Ivanhoe by Scottish author Walter Scott. This is the lovable trickster who represents the depiction of a merry England, a backslapping, ale-drinking, song-singing place where Robin Hood helps the poor by robbing the rich. From Ivanhoe we get our more recognisable story elements. Robin Hood lives by an old oak tree deep in the forest and holds court over his band of merry men. He lives during the Richard and John era in the late 12th and early 13th centuries.
Okay.
He is Robin of Locksley, a Saxon yeoman who fights back against the Norman invaders who are now running the country. And he attends local archery contests and regularly splits an arrow in half because of how accurate he is with a longbow. This interpretation of Robin Hood is the one that spawned a ton of movies in the 20th century. But after learning all this, I'm sure you still have one lingering question. Was Robin Hood a real person? Was he based on anyone in particular? Whether he was a real person or just a character based on the stories of other outlaws is still unknown to this day. Historians have poured through old church records to find any and all men that could be the legendary Robin Hood, and there are a few candidates. There was Robert Hood, who became outlawed in 1213 for committing murder, but he had no ties with Sherwood Forest or Nottingham. Then there was a fugitive named William Robehod, who ran a gang of outlaws around 1261. Another man named John Rabenhod was outlawed in 1272. The problem is that the names Robehod and Rabenhod and all other similar iterations were popping up in records all over the place. Since we know that stories of Robin Hood were being spread around the peasantry in this period of time, there are two logical conclusions. Either these bandits gave their name as Robin Hood to create a legacy for themselves, or the court called them Robin Hood to liken them to a common thief. Remember, the earliest Robin Hood was not jolly and fun. He was an outlaw who would resort to murder to gain material wealth. So, knowing all of this, what kind of Robin Hood do we get in the 2010 film? Does Russell Crowe play the jolly, mischievous, but still charming thief that we've come to know and love? Or is he the yeoman farmer? Or dispossessed noble? Since the character himself is a work of fiction, there's a fair amount of creative license to reinvent the story. But the one thing that can't be changed is history.
Okay. Here's England.
When the movie begins, we find ourselves at Chalus Castle in France, 1199. The title card tells us that King Richard the Lionheart is heading back to England after 10 years of crusading, and it's not even been 5 minutes and the film is already wrong.
Yeah.
Richard was crowned king in 1189 after the death of his father, Henry
the hell?
II. Henry and his family line, the Plantagenets, took power in England at the end of the anarchy in the 12th century. Shortly after, when Richard became king, he left to fight in the Third Crusade. He was nicknamed the Lionheart because of his reputation as a strong warrior and great military leader. Despite this, he was captured in December 1192 and held in prison until England paid a hefty ransom for his release. Richard was then freed and returned home in 1194. Now, during this time, Richard's younger brother John attempted to steal the throne in the king's absence. The problem was that Richard was popular and John was not, and this cowardly attempt to steal the throne while his brother was imprisoned on crusade made him even more unlikable. So when Richard got home in 1194, he quickly sorted out his brother's would-be rebellion, forgave him, and then went about his royal business. This is all well-documented history, yet the film here, in the first few minutes, is already getting it wrong. Richard wasn't on crusade for 10 years. He was, though, at Chalus Castle in 1199. There was a minor rebellion there, and Richard wrote out to deal with it. And I'm willing to admit that the siege here is the best part of the movie. The film actually does a decent job of showing how his army would have attacked the castle, with English longbowmen providing covering fire to support others trying to breach the walls. Even the bit where they set the outer gate on fire is authentic, despite that ridiculous Hollywood-sized fireball. Don't know what the hell those bags were carrying earlier, but in any case, besieging armies did set castle gates on fire to weaken them later for the battering ram. For days, Richard commanded his men to bring down the walls of Chalus Castle, but in an instant, an arrow struck the king, mortally wounding him. Now, the movie would have us believe that he dies immediately on the battlefield after taking arrow to the
11
neck.
days.
It's the plot device that propels the story forward. But in reality, King Richard was shot through the shoulder. It wasn't necessarily a fatal hit, but the surgeon had to dig deep to remove the arrow, and the wound turned gangrenous. The king died 11 days later. Now, we first meet this film's Robin Hood, who's known as Robin Longstride, here at Charlotte Castle. He's a disillusioned longbowman in the king's army, and two things are made clear: that he's loyal to King Richard, and he's been away fighting the Crusades for 10 years. Other than that, we know very little about him. When the king dies, Robin takes this opportunity to desert the army and return home. He convinces a few others to join him, and they turn out to be some of the beloved characters from the traditional stories. There's Little John, Will Scarlet, and Alan Adele the Bard. If it isn't clear by now that this isn't the swashbuckling, jolly Robin Hood we're all used to, a title card gives us an idea of the type of Robin Hood story this will be. A prequel. He's not Robin Hood yet, he's just a man returning home from the Crusades, and he'll turn into Robin Hood by the end of the film. Now, I don't mind the film changing the traditional story of Robin Hood. In fact, I applaud it. Throughout its history, the narrative's been constantly adapted to fit the times, and a proper origin story could be interesting. Just don't mess about with the history. Next, we meet the film's main antagonist, played by Mark Strong, a knight known as Sir Godfrey. Godfrey's been friends with John since childhood, but he's now secretly meeting with the French king, Philippe II, and Philippe wants Richard dead so that John can take over. He sees John as weak and thinks England will be easier to invade and conquer with him in power.
Really?
Okay. It's never made clear why Godfrey betrays England to work with the French, but whatever, he's a baddie. Come to think about it, why is Mark Strong always playing the villain?
Have you ever noticed how in Hollywood movies all the villains are played by Brits?
Maybe we just sound right.
In any case, Godfrey agrees to ambush and kill King Richard on his way home, but by the time this happens, Richard is already dead. The ambush instead kills one of the king's knights, Robert of Locksley. Now, of course, Robin Hood and his new friends hear the ambush happening and rush to stop it. Robin looses an arrow and narrowly misses Godfrey. They're too late to save the knight, but before he dies, Robert of Locksley asks Robin Longstride to bring his sword home to his father, Sir Walter, in Nottingham.
My sword, its value to me is great. It belonged to my father, Sir Walter Locksley, of Nottingham. I've heard of Nottingham. Then the fates have smiled on me. I beg you, Longstride, say you will.
Taking this little guy a long time to die.
I will.
And then 2 seconds later, I'm not even joking, Robin and his mates loot the dead and wear their armor to pass off as knights. Robert of Locksley was carrying back the king's crown to prove he died on the battlefield, so Robin uses this as a cover to sneak back to England. Once back at court, we see John crowned king, and Robin and his men do their best to escape into the crowd without drawing too much attention to themselves. Now, what's so infuriating about this movie is that it gets some of the history right, but most of it's so wrong. At one point, Robin says this:
How do you know that the knights you see walking about are actually knights at all? There is no difference between a knight and any other man,
Are you kidding me?
aside from what he wears. All we need is about us, and we make England wealthy men.
Fate, you smiled upon us at last.
And I, for one, shall not turn my back on her.
Oh boy.
This is such a stupid plan, and I'm amazed it works. The thing is, you can't just slap fancy clothes on commoners and expect people to believe they're knights.
No!
Knights were members of the nobility. They existed in completely different social spheres. And even if Robin Longstride spent time fighting amongst them in the Crusades, they would have occupied different places at camp. So how would Robin know how to act like one? I'm sorry, I just don't buy a common longbowman being able to pass off as a knight. Also inaccurate is when Eleanor of Aquitaine, the Queen Mother, crowns John on the docks. The movie also ignores the fact that there was a debate over who would rule after Richard. The other candidate was Arthur, John's nephew. And while John did eventually become king, it wasn't done in like 2 seconds. I mean, she literally takes the crown straight from Robin's hands and places it onto John's head. Anyway, one of John's first acts as king is to raise taxes even higher, despite protests from his court that England's on the verge of bankruptcy and civil unrest.
Taxation.
Taxation. Milking a dry udder gets you nothing but kicked off the milking stool.
Mother, spare me your farmyard memories. You have none, and I don't understand them.
Is this some sort of peasant joke that I'm too rich to understand?
If that wasn't bad enough, he then fires the treasurer, William Marshall, and replaces him with Godfrey. Now, although Godfrey is fictional, William Marshall is a well-documented figure in the Plantagenet world. He served in the courts of Henry II, Richard the Lionheart John, and John's successor, Henry III. In reality, William Marshall was never replaced as John's treasurer. Anyway, later we see Robin and his friends decide to honour Robert of Locksley's dying request and head to Nottingham. And there's a bit...
And this is just weird. I've become such an English nerd that I'm like, I know a lot of these damn things now. Why would they say all this stuff? Why? It doesn't even serve the drama. Can you at least do something different? Like, make it, like, work for your inaccuracies?
Where Robin looks at the hilt of the sword and sees a phrase he recognizes, rise and rise again until lambs become lions. It then triggers a hidden memory that he can't quite remember, so he decides that there must be something in Nottingham that connects him to his past. He doesn't remember much from before his time in the Crusades, so to add to all the other plot points in the movie, Robin is now on a quest to find himself.
Is this a video game now? Is this a fucking video game storyline now? Is this a fucking video game? Like, what is this? What are we doing? This?
Finally awake. You were trying to cross the border, right? Walked right into that Imperial ambush, same as us. And that thief.
Jesus, man. Did they really think that Skyrim would... Oh, God.
They arrive in Nottingham, they meet Friar Tuck. Now, Friar Tuck is a classic member of Robin's band of merry men, so I won't fault the movie for including him, but technically friars didn't exist until 1209, at the earliest in Italy, not 1199 medieval England. And there's no indication that time passes more than a few weeks throughout the entirety of this film either. So Friar Tuck tells Robin that he can find Sir Walter Locksley up at Pepper Harrow.
Can you tell me where I might find Sir Walter Locksley?
If he's not up at Pepper Harrow...
But because I can't trust anything this movie tells me, I decide to look it up. Pepper Harrow is closer to the southern coast of England, not by Nottingham, far, far away in the Midlands. Why? I just don't get it. Instead of coming up with a fake name for the Locksley Manor or doing some proper research, they picked the name of a place that actually exists on the other side of the country and has nothing to do with the story. Anyway, Robin goes and meets the elderly and blind Sir Walter Locksley and runs into Marion on the way. In Ridley Scott's iteration of the story, Marion was married to Robert Locksley, making her the lady of the manor. Robin breaks the news that Robert Locksley is dead and he's come to return the family sword. So Walter is understandably upset at the loss of his son, but comes up with a plan to help Marion. With Robert dead and Walter on the verge of dying, Marion will lose Pepper Harrow because medieval women can't inherit property. So he asks Robin to pretend to be his son Robert to prevent this from happening. And if he does this, Walter promises to tell Robin what he knows about his childhood because he did in fact grow up near Nottingham. This is clearly a take on the Robin Hood legend that dates back to the Tudors, the one where Robin Hood is actually a nobleman, though dispossessed of his land because of King John and the Sheriff of Nottingham. But in this version, he becomes a nobleman in a cockamamie scheme, and you know what? It actually kind of fits the playful nature of the Robin Hood tales. So later we see Robin and Marion grow closer as they're forced to pretend to be husband and wife, and Robin starts to genuinely
Oh, God. Boy, this is stupid!
Care for the villagers. One of their problems is the Sheriff of Nottingham. Despite being Robin's arch nemesis in the classic tales, as they're forced to pretend to be husband and wife, and Robin starts to genuinely care for the villagers. One of their problems is the Sheriff of Nottingham. Despite being Robin's arch nemesis in the classic tales, the Sheriff plays a very minor role in this film. The Sheriff, along with the Catholic Archbishop in York, keeps taking more and more of Nottingham's grain and food, leaving them with nothing for the harvest.
Marion, I've been at Pepper Harrow, waiting in vain for Sir Walter to receive me. Kindly tell him I have better things to do than haunt his threshold.
That you have, while robbers are roaming free in Sherwood. That's Sheriff's business. Why don't you look to it?
Tell the old fool that next time I'll break his door down. And if he is too proud to pay
No, he's not too proud.
He's too poor. In the name of King Richard, you have stripped our wealth to pay for foreign adventures, whilst at home the Church, in the name of a merciful God, has reaped without mercy the largest share of what we have set aside to feed ourselves.
Okay.
Between a sheriff and the bishop, I wouldn't care to judge who's the greater curse on honest English folk.
Robin then vows to help. Along with Friar Tuck, Little John, Will Scarlet, and Alan Adale, he ambushes the church's wagon in the night and steals back the grain. And this is a fun scene, reminiscent of the other Robin Hood movies, where the band of merry men are being lovable tricksters and stealing from the rich to give back to the poor. In fact, this is the first time this movie has felt like a traditional Robin Hood story, and it's half over already.
Ugh. I know who the Sheriff of Nottingham is now. It's my boy from Pillars of the Earth.
Politics may be a bargain between beggars, but compromise between good and evil is never possible. God's work does not blend with power or greed. Your moral mortar is corrupt, and the walls of your church will crumble, and the roof will fall, and you and everyone who worships with you will be crushed. I would sooner live out the rest of my days feeding pigs at the monastery than feeding your ravenous ambition.
And I think he's also in that show, The Last Kingdom. Good actor.
It's at this point in the movie where Godfrey goes out and about wreaking havoc as the new royal treasurer. He's convinced John that he needs to use a forceful hand to collect taxes and make the people loyal to its new king, but that's not his real motive. Instead, he's trying to spark a civil war between the northern barons and their king, creating an England so fractured it'll be easy for King Philip to invade from France. To do this, he slaughters the innocent in King John's name and burns northern cities to the ground. At least that's what he's supposed to be doing, but it's kind of hard to know that when the movie pulls this kind of dialogue.
My lord.
I'm listening.
Peterborough has been burned by the King's men.
Peterborough's not a northern city, you moron. I mean, seriously, what is up with the geography in this movie? I mean, this was shot by an English director, by an English crew, in bloody England. Did no one have the balls to correct his American scriptwriter when filming? Anyway, back to the movie. With civil war looming in the air, Sir Walter Locksley decides to finally tell Robin about his father, and apparently he was a stonemason.
But he was more than that. He was a visionary.
What did he see?
Here we go.
Kings have a need of their subjects, no less than their subjects have need of kings. A dangerous idea. Your father was a philosopher. He had a way of speaking that took you by the ears and by the heart.
None of these things can be written down, Robin. You must commit them to your very soul.
Rise and rise again until lambs become lions.
Finally, hundreds listened, thousands, who took up his call for the rights of all ranks, from baron to serf.
Rise and rise again, until lambs become lions.
Now, there's a few problems with the scene. While it may be possible that a tradesman like Robin's father was literate, it's highly unlikely. In medieval times, literacy was predominantly limited to the clergy and nobility. For commoners, it was significantly lower, pretty much rock bottom. But if Robin's father was, I highly doubt that a stonemason would be the one running around spouting ideas about class inequality and being repressed.
Help! Help! I'm being repressed!
Anyway, Sir Walter goes on to pull out a copy of a document he calls the Charter of Rights, which Robin's father wrote about 20 to 25 years before the events of the film. Okay, so now we have a literate stonemason who wrote a charter calling for equal rights that all the barons in the north signed. That doesn't seem like... Wait, no. Is this supposed to be the Magna Carta? Oh my god, it is. Movie, are you seriously trying to make us believe that Robin Hood's dad wrote the Magna Carta? Probably the most important political document in English history. For those of you who might need a little background...
Okay, also, I love how my dumbass just looked at that thing and I'm like, yeah, that's supposed to be the Magna Carta. I mean, come on! Yeah, no, you're saying that a peasant... That is... I guess it's hopeful. I see what they were trying to do there, but no.
Here's the real story behind the Magna Carta, because you're certainly not going to get it here. Throughout the beginning of the 13th century, John was at war with King Philip II over his family's land in France, and he lost almost all of it. Wanting to rebuild the royal treasury, he went to the barons for help. Already unhappy with John's rule, the barons seized this chance to force him to sign the Magna Carta in 1215. This document severely limited the monarchy's absolute power and established parliament, where the barons could have more say in government. Essentially, the Magna Carta established the basis for common law in England as we know it today. John wasn't thrilled by this, of course, but he put a seal on it anyway because he needed their support. He then tried to ignore the provisions he had just agreed to, which resulted in the First Barons' War, a small civil war. The barons went so far as to offer the English crown to Prince Louis of France in 1216.
He also forgot to mention that the Pope told him basically, like, you know, you gotta do this, you gotta rebel against this thing.
When John died that same year, the barons changed their minds and forced the French off English land. Then William Marshal, yes, the same one in the movie, reissued the Magna Carta, which the new king Henry III signed in 1225, and all was well. So you could see why this is an egregious retelling of some very important and well-known history. Back to the movie, William Marshall's been spying on Godfrey ever since he was replaced at court, and he's found out Godfrey's plan to bring the French over to invade England. Marshall can't trust John, of course, so he goes to his mummy instead.
Mummy!
John is no Richard the Last, Your Majesty. If I serve the throne, the throne will endure.
Speak plainly, Marshal. What's troubling you?
The crown is in peril. Godfrey has been plotting with Philip of France. French troops have already landed on our shores and they are murdering Englishmen in the name of King John. The northern barons will make civil war against the throne, leaving our coast defenseless against the invasion.
Okay, that's one thing I'll say in this movie's benefit, that William Hurt is not bad at playing at doing a British accent. Not terrible. It's not terrible.
Which is certainly coming.
John eventually accepts the truth that Godfrey has betrayed both him and England. He's also told that the Northern Barons are close to starting a civil war, so he decides to deal with them before that can happen. Now, all of this is bollocks, of course, but what's really frustrating is that they're rewriting the First Barons' War and the creation of the Magna Carta to fit this attempt at a Robin Hood story. Why even include the subplot? We don't need a fake history of how the Magna Carta came to exist in the middle of a Robin Hood film. They could have made the whole movie about Robin Hood tracking Godfrey down instead of inserting this political nonsense. Anyway, King John heads to Barnstown where he confronts the Northern Barons assembling to march against him. William Marshal is there trying to mediate, but it's not going well. The Barons are angry at John's excessive taxation and Godfrey's killing spree, whilst John is angry that his Barons aren't blindly loyal to him. At the height of tensions, Robin Hood arrives. Thanks to Sir Walter Loxley, he now remembers his past and recognizes the place instantly. This is where his dad taught him about the lambs become lions thing that's been plaguing him for the whole movie. He sees his father's stone craftsmanship in the middle of the town square, touches the ground, and has another flashback. Anyway, Robin approaches the crowd and tries to finish what his father started. It's a pivotal moment in the movie where Robin establishes himself as a leader despite his common upbringing.
If your majesty were to offer justice, justice in the form of a charter of liberties, allowing every man to forage for his hearth, to be safe from conviction without cause or prison without charge, to work, eat and live on the sweat of his own brow, and be as many as he can. And that king would be great. Not only would he receive the loyalty of his people, but their love as well. What we would ask, Your Majesty, is liberty. Liberty by law.
Your Majesty, my lords, the French fleet is in the Channel.
How do you know that? How can you possibly know the French fleet's real-time location? Do you have like a guy in a boat waiting for them? By the time he sees them, it'd already be too late to report back though, wouldn't it?
Oh. I give my word that such a charter will be written on my mother's life, I swear.
Wow. The movie's plot just now is that the King of England gave up absolute power because some pleb dressed up as a nobleman asked him to. You couldn't even do that today. And another thing, nobody in their right mind would be convinced that this man was Robert of Locksley outright.
Thank you!
They'd all be thinking, who is this Joker?
Yeah, they probably would have killed him. Like, as soon as this guy started talking, they would have chopped his damn head off.
Speak for Sir Walter Loxley.
Who are you?
And come to think about it, if all the Northern Barons already signed this charter 40 years ago, judging by Robin Hood age anyway, what made them magically forget? Seriously, were they like listening to some random guy's monologue just now and were like, oh yeah, totally forgot about that. Yeah, what he said, we should totally do that. Conveniently, the film doesn't give us much time to think about this because Godfrey's in Nottingham setting fire to the place. The barons follow Robin and his band of merry men to save everyone, including Maid Marian, who has created an unlikely alliance with some orphaned boys who live in the woods. Don't ask me who the hell they are because the movie never cares to explain, why should I? Anyway, Robin manages to stop the destruction, but not before Godfrey kills Sir Walter Locksley and escapes. And in another one of Ridley Scott's bizarre decisions, Marian and Robin cremate his body in the middle of a field. Why? What is this, a Viking funeral? You do realize this is medieval England, right? The Catholic Church banned cremations because it was seen as desecrating the body. Also, as a cremation, this is a really piss-poor effort. Did you guys maybe forget something?
The grass burns rapidly, and the fire spreads quickly. Thanks to Robin Hood's shitty cremation, an ecosystem that's existed for millions of years will now cease to exist. What a prick.
Robin Hood has destroyed the entire ecosystem of England. What a fucking prick. Yeah, the guy actually I don't know if that was him doing that voice or it was somebody else, but that guy just sounded like he was born to narrate animal documentaries. He even says BBC up there. Yeah.
With absolutely no chemistry, Robin kisses Maid Marian goodbye and rides off to deal with Godfrey, who is waiting for King Philip to sail over the English Channel and start his invasion. So they ride south to a prearranged destination to meet up with the rest of King John's army at a place called the White Horse. Now, I assumed they meant the Uffington White Horse, which is a 3,000-year-old geoglyph of a horse carved into the chalky hillside of White Horse Hill in Oxfordshire. However, when Robin and co ride past it, we can clearly see it is not the Uffington White Horse. They look nothing alike. Now, perhaps it could have been one of England's many other white horses. The problem is that the oldest after that was carved only a few hundred years ago, and some others even more recently. The only one that would have existed in King John's era is the Bronze Age Uffington White Horse. But apparently, it didn't look enough like a sodding horse to make the final cut. But despite all the other nonsense up to this point, we have now reached the worst part of the movie.
Oh no! Oh no! Oh god, I'm barely surviving this thing as it is. It might have been a mistake to learn so much about medieval England. Like, I'm a damn nerd about that. I'm just like him now with this damn information. I am just as pissed as he is. And also, you could have just put a couple of lines into the horse to make it look a little bit more horse-like. God damn, man. Like, if anything, that was a waste of money. Like, god damn, Ridley Scott, what happened to you? You used to be so cool.
Robin and his crew combine forces with William Marshall and the King to fight off the French invasion. And as you might have guessed, this isn't historically accurate either. There was no French invasion in 1199. There was in 1216 when the northern barons invited Prince Louis across to take England when John refused to honor the Magna Carta in 1215. But there was no storming of the beaches. When the French landed in real life, it was completely uncontested. But to hell with accuracy, right? This movie needs a big battle scene, so let's just make shit up.
And also, yeah, let's make it look like the invasion of Normandy during World War fucking II! What is up with those ships? What is up with them?
History lesson come to life.
No, it's not.
It isn't. It's totally inaccurate. Wait, here come the ninjas.
As Robin sets up on the cliff edge with his archers, King Philip sends his ships ashore, where his men disembark from what looks like World War II amphibious landing crafts.
Ooh! You see? I'm glad I'm not the only smart person here who actually knows this stuff. Like, what is your major malfunction? I'm turning into nostalgia critic here. Like, goddamn, Ridley Scott. That makes it even sadder because you're fucking English.
Hallelujah! Holy shit! Where's the Tylenol?
Seriously, look at these things. These types of boats didn't exist anytime close to the medieval period.
Never.
Is Ridley Scott just copying Saving Private Ryan but with
so.
medieval technology?
I think
anyway,
so.
Robin fires off a few volleys of arrows before abandoning the high ground to join the cavalry charge on the beach below. I don't think any self-respecting archer would do that. You have a tactical advantage and have these silly sods at your mercy, but no, you still want to go down to the beach anyway and join the other knights in battle. And in the midst of all this, Robin sees Marion fighting alongside her gaggle of forest orphan boys. I guess Robin needed a bigger, more emotional reason to kill Godfrey, so the movie glosses over how Marion got there or how she convinced all these kids to join her. A woman joining a battle she's not supposed to be in, fighting with smaller folk at her side. Why does that sound familiar?
Joan of Arc! Joan of Arc, even though she's fucking French! And oh yeah, they were fighting against the English. Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god, I can't take this movie. I can't take this fucking movie. I thought I was going to watch it after this. I thought it was going to be so cool. Oh my god, it is the stupidest fucking thing I've ever seen in my life. Stupidest fucking thing I've ever seen in my life. Oh, okay, that too. Fine.
I am no man.
But here, Marion gets captured by Godfrey and is almost killed before Robin saves the day.
God.
In an admittedly cool throwback to how King Richard was killed at the beginning of the movie, Robin looses an arrow and hits Godfrey in the neck. The French king sees his plan has failed and turns back, effectively ending the battle.
And he also went... Sacre bleu! God, this fucking movie.
Everyone starts cheering, and William Marshall makes the mistake of telling King John that they're really cheering for Robin and not him. And I love the idea that this is the reason why King John refuses to sign the Magna Carta as promised. That he was willing to give up his powers before, but once he saw some peasant get some attention for 5 minutes, he changes his mind just because he's a little jelly.
Now you come to me with this document, seeking to limit the authority given to me by God.
Dyer, you give your word! Dyer, we look to you!
Look to your estates instead! Archer! You are fortunate that I am in a merciful mood. But as for Robin Longspike, that Mason's son, for the crimes of theft and incitement to cause unrest, who pretended to be a knight of the realm, a crime punishable by death, I declare him from this day forth to be an outlaw!
And with that, this origin story is complete. Robin Hood is an outlaw and he's made an enemy of King John. We end the film with Robin, his merry men, Maid Marian and her gang of orphan children living in Sherwood Forest. And it's only at the end here that the film looks even remotely recognizable as a Robin Hood story. I think that's what bothers me the most. This film doesn't feel like Robin Hood. And if it didn't have characters like Little John and Friar Tuck, he may not even known it was. Based on how it ended, the movie was clearly setting up for a sequel where Ridley Scott could have maybe done something that better resembled the folklore hero, but it was so poorly received that there was never hope of a second film. And thank God for that. There was just too much happening for one story. The Crusades, the relationship between Richard and John, the power of Eleanor of Aquitaine, the shaky relations with the French and King Philip, the Northern Barons and their threats of war, the Magna Carta. Why is there so much happening? This is supposed to be a Robin Hood film, and yet we get a historically inaccurate foray into medieval England instead. The Sheriff of Nottingham was in this film for about 5 minutes and totally irrelevant to the plot.
Because I think they wanted to screw this actor over. This guy could have had a great chance to actually prove his talent to a wider audience. And what does Ridley Scott do? He f***ed him in the ass.
Merry men were essentially an afterthought. These are main characters in Robin Hood stories, and they might as well not been in the movie.
Fuck!
Look, I can accept an alternative take on the Robin Hood legend. After all, that's part of the history of Robin Hood, that the character changes over time to mirror different things. After the happy-go-lucky Errol Flynn and Disney animated version, I can accept a grittier take on this classic character. But what I can't accept is bad history and a rehashing of other better films all rolled into one story.
Oh, wow. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I would have liked it if I had seen it before. I mean, it happened with Braveheart. It happened with The Patriot especially. And it happened with Apocalypto. I loved all those movies before I found out how inaccurate they were. Ooh, wow. That movie was not very good. Boy, it pissed me off. Wow. Let me know what you think in the comments, and let me know what you think the best Robin Hood movie is. Is it Robin Hood Men in Tights, the 1993 one, or Disney. I think I know what y'all are going to say. But please, smash that like button if you want to see more sexy and nerdy content, and subscribe if you think I deserve it. And I'll see you on the next episode.